give the audience a little bit of background, what you've been doing the last 20 plus years, and what you're doing now in your role, and especially coming back to the Sandals brands from Malia.
Well, yeah, I began my career a few years ago, let's put it that way, on the agency side. So it was advertising agencies, marketing agencies. I was always very, very interested in creative. I come from a family that has a creative background, thespian mother. But it was really the strategic side that I was interested in more than anything else. So I was on the account strategy side of things, but always very much involved in the creative process because I had a big interest in it. And I did that for a good few years before I got an invitation to go client side. And that was to take on the role of director of advertising for the Sandals brand, working directly for the owner and founder, Butch Stewart, who sadly passed away a few months ago. And I did that for the better part of nearly 12 years. It was a really interesting ride. It was a baptism of fire. It was an MBA on the street. But it was learning from one of the best intuitive marketers, I think, certainly the travel industry has maybe ever seen. And in due course, I was reached a stage where I was, looking for a bigger picture, if you like, meaning a more diverse picture in terms of brands. Lifestyle brands were were evolving and emerging, and the big thing, and I was very interested in getting into that space. And for a few different reasons, including my European background, I was given the opportunity to go join the Marriott Hotels group. And I went from being a VP of advertising and marketing for a brand-led organization in Sandals to joining really a mid-sized global hotel group, a more corporate setting, a bigger brand portfolio, some 6 hotel brands plus some others, if you include loyalty programs. And I was invited to move back to Europe and lead the idea of brand strategy within the group, which involved building teams, building processes, clarifying the brand architecture, et cetera, and we can talk more about those things.
Yeah.
And I did that for the better part of 15 years. All told, until recently coming back stateside, back to Miami, and then being presented with the possibility of returning to the Sandals group, which, given the circumstances, was really a unique proposition. And I'm happy to be back home, as everybody is saying. But I've been away for an awful long time, so I'm coming back home with a very different worldview and perspective.
Yeah, Mallorca, Spain wasn't a bad place to hang your hat for a while, right?
Hey, I went from the beaches of Miami to the beaches of the Caribbean. Then I swapped all of that for the beaches of the Mediterranean. Yeah, Mallorca's stunning, stunningly beautiful.
So on the flip side, I was just thinking about, you're at this regionalized Sandals brand, a Jamaican / Caribbean brand, iconic, beloved by the weddings and honeymoons folks, and obviously the beaches brands. What's that like? And then going over and transitioning into multiple 4, 5, 6 brands, that Malia had, and what are those challenges like for you as you're entering into an organization, and just the transition of that? Was it a difficult decision at the time, or was it a decision where you said, hey, this is an incredible opportunity? And what are those things that you learn from going from a smaller brand that you bring to these bigger brands? It's like I always associate it when I was at a smaller magazine group, and then I went to Condé Nast, and I loved everything Condé Nast did, but they loved everything I did at the other smaller places. So it's this dichotomy. So what's that like?
Boy, that's a huge question. I could talk for about 2 hours on that, but
we only have 25 more minutes.
Yeah, no, I know. No, listen, it was a very interesting transition for many different reasons. I mean, one was cultures. So I was, and I mean this on different layers. So I went from a true brand culture, a singular focus, singular concept, a group that was driven by its marketing and brand footprint. In fact, we had a supplier partner who was on the wholesale side. It was Air Canada Vacations, and this guy Jim Proctor, and he said one time we were discussing co-op marketing programs with them, and he says, you know, you guys aren't a hotel company. You're a marketing company that happens to have hotels. And I understood what he meant at the time, but I understood that an awful lot better when I arrived in Palma, Mallorca, Spain, into a 400 hotel company, 43 different countries, and owners, asset managers, franchisees, the whole mix changed. And in terms of how you had to sort of interact with that reality was completely different. So I went from being the owner of the brand, everything about the brand, every decision based on the brand, hotel managers following the brand, to a culture where everybody had to agree with the brand. Everybody had something to say about the brand. Owners had something to say about the brand. General managers had things to say about the brand in terms of what the priorities should be and how it should go. So brand culture to a corporate culture, and the amazing thing about the brand culture statement is that Sandals was all about a brand back in the 80s and 90s when brand culture wasn't even something you talked about, and it was a customer-centric brand that is something that is very buzzy now, but was really just something we took as being normal and took for granted. Then there was there was that aspect, but then there was the big culture shock of language and all of this stuff. I mean, I've got a Spanish last name, but even living in Miami for many years, my Spanish was average at best. All of a sudden, I was entering into a Spanish business culture and having to sort of, navigate all of those things as well. So there was literal culture shock, as well as brand culture shock.
Yeah.
And I think that what everybody loves is what they don't have, right? So what the Melia Group loved was this unbelievable brand that Sandals had built. And why can't we have that? Why can't we do that? And it needs to be baked in on every level to achieve what Sandals had done. And I think that, there were two aspects to that. One is that, Sandals has the customer paying the brand tax. So the cost of marketing, the cost of branding, the cost of everything that you need to do is baked into the price. You're not trying to subtract a marketing budget from the bottom line as a cost. You're taxing the customer for it. And the other thing that was uniquely different between the two was my favorite subject of all, which is ROI, right? I love ROI. And the reason I love the ROI conversation is because everybody wants a silver bullet, but you know what? You can't all have a silver bullet, because economics will teach you that there's a thing called, supply and demand, winners and losers. Everybody's not a winner. But the thing about the ROI conversation was that the Sandals experience, that owner who was a true entrepreneur understood that it's a return on investment, and investment comes with risk.
Yeah.
Investment doesn't guarantee a return. And I went into this corporate culture where everything was business case, everything was ROI driven, and it was almost paralysis by analysis, because everyone was looking for the guaranteed bottom line. But the truth is, at the end of the day, we're educating ourselves on the risk and making decisions based on that.
So you and I have been through a lot the last, let's call it 20 years, just watching, especially the hospitality business, the transformative technology that's come into play, positively and negatively. Talk a little bit about, and you're just kind of your opinion, how, the look at the OTAs, social media, Facebook, TikTok, the meta search, the kayaks of the world. And then obviously you had Google jump into travel. You've got you and I earlier in the week talked a little bit about YouTube, and then obviously the 800-pound gorilla that's still sitting out there, Amazon. Where do you see technology going? But also with those companies, what was the most transformative technology that you've seen these last kind of 5, 10, 15 years, even 20 years? And what's exciting about it, and also what's not exciting about it, what's dangerous about it, or what's a threat to you as a hospitality and a hotel group?
Well, I suppose, I mean, we're similar and at the same time, unlike other industries and products, I suppose. So when you talk about all of the OTAs and the Expedias and the Booking.coms, and you talk about Google, what they're doing now with hotel ads, and you talk about what Facebook is, everyone is trying to get the transaction, because the travel economy is so lucrative that if anybody can cut anybody else out, there's a lot of money to be made, and that's really what all of that is, jostling for position. In the end, as the brand, as the hotel owner, I'm the bottom line net. So I need to make sure I got to make sure I own my relationship with my customer. This is very, very important. But in the end, the customer will choose how and when they're going to purchase. And actually, in the end, as long as I'm optimized in the different channels, I can be okay. What I need to make sure is that my brand's protected, my pricing integrity is protected, and that's where these guys can really do a number on you. They can ruin your brand, because actually Booking's trying to build their brand in front of yours.
Right.
And there's a lot of travel hotel products out there where the brand isn't so important, but for someone like ourselves at Sandals, and there are many others, brand is super important. But I think if I was I think the big disruptor that I've seen in the last decade has to be Airbnb. Airbnb was disruptive to the maximum, much more so than I think the OTAs coming on the scene. The OTAs Expedia was sort of replacing the traditional tour operator packager, competing with the travel agent a little bit in that sort of gray space. But Airbnb was, a very different proposition in terms of what it represented. It was a threat to the hotel industry, quote unquote.
Right, right. So I go back to, that I call them the halcyon days, right, of glossy magazines that evolved into.
Sounds so old.
It was old. It was a while ago, T. So right, we're at Condé and New Yorker and Gourmet and Traveler. We would meet around, and it was, by the way, it was really a fun time back then. We traveled a lot. We went to all different continents. We met as an industry in London and Berlin and Montego, wherever. Just a lot of fun. But back then, it really was relationships. It was relationship driven. It was brand / Albert at Condé Nast. I'm going to speak to Albert. Versus now, it's like, these relationships are a little bit more challenging. Obviously, COVID brought up even more of that challenge. But there's also this, introduction to new technology, reliance on that. And what's your take on that? Do you miss the face-to-face, meaning real face-to-face, not just me coming down to Miami and discussing, but literally the idea of working together, long-term relationships, building out marketing, sitting down, whiteboarding. Those were all the things that we did. And is that going to be a challenge going forward with the new technology and just reliance on ad tech, martech, things like that?
Oh,
Loaded question.
no, listen, it's a great question. I think I'll try and distill it. I mean, I think, look, at the end of the day, and I've been in the business of marketing, branding, hospitality long enough to maybe say this. Everything's changed, but nothing's changed. So what I mean by that is that, you know, the tools, the ability to have access to data and insights into who your customer is and what the behavior is. I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed in terms of informing us of what to do, but the core hasn't changed. You know, the core to any great brand is its storytelling, its uniqueness, its differentiation, having, you know, a real story to tell that actually connects on a very emotional level with the customer. And in the end, you know, in hospitality, you know, we're all in the business of being a lifestyle brand at the end of the day, because we are, as you know, travel really represents an extension of customers' lifestyles. So that hasn't changed. That's the same thing, you know, it's as true today as it was, you know, 20, 30 years ago. The other thing that hasn't changed at all is the idea of, you know, and this is the new term, not the new term, but this is what everyone, great content, right? We went through, you know, some years ago, content is king. It's like, well, yeah, because it always has been. The great content, you know, used to be, you know, the editorial on the pages of your glossy magazines.
Right.
And that's where I was looking to put my message and connect with the customer who I knew some basic demographic facts and psychographic facts about, because you would do your, you know, you would do your circulation surveys and tell me who the customer was. But in the end, it's about putting my message next to great content or associating myself with great content. That's still the same, but how you do that now is very, very different. You know, you're integrated into the content. You actually, sadly, have to create the content yourself. You know, the biggest TV network on earth is YouTube. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of the content on YouTube is not that great. You know, in the old days, it was simpler. You know, the TV networks could afford to produce great content, and you could simply just, you know, decide what time, what program, and, you know, enter into the game with, you know, with your marketing message.
Yeah.
But now you kind of have to create the content. You have to, you know, you have to do a lot of things very, very, very differently than you did before. But at the end of the day, you know, it's still similar to what it was before.
So good segue, right? I work, you know, the company that we're working for and that you're on with us is Influential, which is all about data, using AI, using influencers, macro, micro, nano influencers who activate content, right? Collaboration, very cool ways to discover and speak to new audiences and existing audiences, right? So, you know, how are you, you know, what's your take on that part of the conversation, influencers, social media? What role, you know, has it played in your background, whether at Malia or going forward here with Unique and the Sandals and brands and things? And what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, listen, I think it's I think it's hugely important. I mean, when you know, previously when I was at Malia, I was probably investing upwards between 30 and 40% of my total brand marketing budgets into social media. That was a combination of different things, but and there's a huge opportunity for the Sandals brand moving forwards to to move itself more in the direction of becoming a socially led brand, if you like. And I think, you know, why it's so important in our space of the industry that I'm in is that, you know, I mean, that's kind of what travel is. Travel is Instagram, you know. So I'm not trying to make my, you know, bottled water relevant on Instagram, and I actually have the content, and I'm a very natural component of somebody's own, social media footprint. We talk about influencers too. I mean, as though, it's all about macro influencers that we invest in and we co-create with and all of that. And that's all very much part of the thing. But there's also the actual UGC side of things, which in our space, there is nothing more powerful than harnessing great UGC. Yep. And making that part of your storytelling. And there are some amazing tools. I mean, we're looking at subscribing to new tools here at Sandals. I was using a tool called Flowix previously when I was in Europe, which allows you to, to scrape through the UGC, select what you want to use, and even start serving that up in paid format so that your sort of actual display or paid social campaigns start to use UGC. And it's amazing what you'll get, especially for us, in our space. There's a democratization, that's taken place of good content in our space, and it's there's plenty of clients with great drone equipment, with extensive, photographic aids, where they're performing the role of an influencer as a parent while they're on vacation with their kids,
So we got a few more minutes here. Just real quickly, I know, you lost Gordon Butch Stewart, a mentor, a father figure, an iconic builder of brands, kind of like a Richard Branson, these kind of bigger than life executives who then, turn into these incredible brand ambassadors and then iconic. What did you learn from him? What's your takeaway from, obviously friend, mentor, colleague / pretty demanding boss, I imagine at times. What, talk a little bit about that.
Well, he was incredibly demanding, because he was incredibly demanding of himself. He was 24/7. He was a real visionary. And the one thing that, that he really did teach me, it's not about, it's about what's possible. We put so many limitations on ourselves as human beings in general. Well, because it's raining, and because I'm a little bit too old, and because I'm a bit overweight, there's all sorts of reasons that I can't do something. He never, ever spent more than 30 seconds lamenting over why you couldn't do something. It was all about why you could. And his ability to drive his teams, to build belief, brands are a belief system. And when I was at the Melia Group, preaching belief in brands for 15 years. But, it's different when it really is a belief system that people buy into. And he had an ability to lead by example, to lead by virtue of his vision. And he did something back in the 1980s, which everybody is, calling textbook today, which is building his brand around the customer.
Right.
It was all about the customer. He was in his hotels. He was in the cities that the people lived, understanding, where the New Yorker went to eat, how he consumed life on a day-to-day basis, and developing a product for him in the Caribbean that, he would want to come and experience. We call that customer-centric, customer-driven, with our chief experience officer sitting on top of the corporate structure, driving the organization in that direction. He didn't do that. He did that by instinct. It might look different today if he did it again than it did back then. But when he did do it back then, he was breaking boundaries.
So great segue. So you're looking into the future. Butch's son Adam is part of the architect now, and you're working very closely with him. And what does your future look like 5, 10, 15 years out? You're what's on the horizon, and what are those cool things that are going to differentiate you, which you have to do in hospitality, right? I mean, there was the suites, the villas over water. Okay, you know what? We've kind of been there, done that, right? Now you've got to build brand ambassadors. You've got to keep your brand alive and zesty and keep it going. And boy, there's a lot of competition out there. How do you do that? What does your future look like at Sandals and things like that?
Well, listen, Sandals has been a leader in the all-inclusive space. Sandals has built a brand that is probably best in class within the travel industry, maybe, certainly within the hotel space. So we have to continue to lead the race. But there's a lot of evolution that's taken place across different industries, including hospitality, that the all-inclusive category can really learn from. You know, I was talking earlier, you know, mentioning the idea of lifestyle. You know, you don't think of Sandals as a lifestyle brand because, you know, by definition in our space, you know, the W's and the Edition hotels, those are the lifestyle brands. But the truth of the matter is that every brand has to start to move forward and become an extension of lifestyle. Starbucks has done it in their space. IKEA has done it in the space of, you know, cheap furniture that's, you know, making design accessible on a very low price point, but actually delivering an overall customer experience, which is, you know, best in class. So as Starbucks done the same thing with coffee, you know. So I think our job is to carve that out within this space and really deliver a really, you know, authentic, and I hate to use that word because everyone's using it, but a really authentic travel experience that is rooted in sustainability and corporate responsibility, because that's the company started the Sandals Foundation some years ago and has really blazed the trail that we're going to start to talk about a little more than we have done in the past, because reef preservation, giving back to the local communities, educating the peoples of the island. You know, we need the islands to be sustainable and successful in the future, because our own future within the context of tourism depends on it.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of space that we can play into. We have been innovators. We need to continue to push, you know, the innovation lever. But if I was to tell you everything that we're going to do, you know, then there would be no
steal it and sell it to someone else.
Listen, and there's a lot of work that we need to do.
No doubt.
You know, so
so the year ahead, you know, what are you looking to? One thing, you know, you're looking forward to accomplishing this year professionally. What are you looking to accomplish professionally? But also, you've got a beautiful family. You brought them back from Mallorca. They're probably a little pissed off about that, but actually, you've been back for a while, so there's you know, they spent some good times in Europe and in the Med. But talk to a little bit about what you're gonna, you know, what do you want to accomplish professionally? You've been doing this a long time, and everyone's got goals, especially coming out of COVID, right? What are you professionally looking to accomplish, and then, you know, how are you juggling that and making sure that your family and kids and beautiful wife are still love you?
Well,
happy wife, happy life.
Happy wife, happy life. I've got 3 teenagers. They hate me anyway, right? So it doesn't really matter what I do at this point. Listen, professionally,
they hate you more when they're 20.
Yeah, no. Listen, professionally, I think there's a few things. I mean, number one, you know, the pent-up demand and demand bubble, you know, in the travel space is real and it's happening. So we're actually into a boom moment in terms of business that's coming through the doors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have any sort of short to mid-term issues, but I do think that we need to be looking beyond the next couple of years. This is all about, you know, the 3 to 5, even 5 to 10 years in terms of where we evolve this brand and the space that we, you know, that we move it forward into. So I'm excited to do that. Putting together new teams, putting in new processes, doing, taking advantage of all of those tools that I was talking about before, really getting deep into, data insights on the customer, really planning the strategy of the brand by clarifying it in terms of how it sits within the category, what it means vis-a-vis the consumer, and then in terms of the opportunity that sits internally within the brand itself, because there's a sweet spot there that gives you your brand imperative moving forwards and informs us in terms of what we should build, how we should build it, what the experience should be, what is that customer experience blueprint look like, that will be catering to the next generation of millennial customers into the Gen Zs. So there's a lot to look forward to as far as that goes. My number one goal, though, is not really to do that. My number one goal is not to screw up. I don't want to be the guy that screwed up the biggest brand in the all-inclusive hospitality space, because I don't want, that's not what I want to do. And I'm saying that, lightheartedly, but I'm not actually lighthearted about it. But Stuart's
whatever happened to Tony Cortizas? Oh, he screwed up Sandals.
Yeah, he came back. He spent a few months. He spent a lot of money, and then we had to throw him out because he was.
What a disaster that was.
No, listen, it's an honor and a responsibility to try and move forward the legacy that Mr. Stewart built, and be in line with a very bold vision that his son Adam has moving forwards and where he wants to take the company.
Yeah. Couple of questions, Tony. We got about 3 to 5 minutes left here. So how important is data behind influencer marketing? Do the metrics drive the messaging?
Well, I mean, listen, you've got to use data in terms of what you're doing with influencers. So I think it was James before that was speaking a lot, understanding, what they bring to the table in terms of the audience that they bring. How does that match with your customer? What kind of content that are they putting forward, and the engagement that it's getting? Does that look like content that you can co-create together and put in front of their audience, as well as amplifying it out to your own customers? So I mean, listen, the data obviously is fundamental, but then you have to take that data, and then you have to make some subjective decisions as well in terms of what's a really genuinely good brand fit, because the numbers can be all right, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily give you the answer in terms of a brand fit.
So we're hopefully coming out of COVID here, and 3 months ago, let's face it, did not look like today. We were still very nervous. We weren't sure how the vaccines were going to evolve, and it's clear that not only in the United States but globally, things are evolving positively, and states are opening up, and governments and countries are opening up. And how, though? I mean, you have your plans. You're evolving into fiscal, calendar, quarterly. How do you juggle that? Do you hurry up and wait? Do you pivot, or do you say, hey, stay on brand, stay on target, and don't let the noise get in our way here? We gotta, we're gonna evolve, we're gonna move forward, but understanding that COVID is still a huge issue for travelers, especially internationally.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of big brand decisions, the customers are coming, the customers are biting. The US market, we draw most heavily from the US, and it's the most advanced, recovery, I think, that's going on right now. But it is a real concern in terms of making big brand decisions and evolutionary type decisions, because if you're going to do, and we are going to be doing deep dive into sort of customer understanding and identifying customer segmentation and understanding how we're performing vis-a-vis choice drivers within that customer universe, as well as how we're performing vis-a-vis our brand comp sets. But all of that right now is kind of tainted because the the psyche of the customer there's nothing normal about what's going on.
Right.
They're not making decisions the same way. They're making decisions possibly very emotionally. They've been locked up for 1 year. They just want to, get out of the house. There's all sorts of dynamics that are taking place that are going to have a huge influence in terms of what your findings are going to be. So we're looking at getting into some of that sort of deep dive work later in the year, maybe towards the fall time before, when we've returned to a bit more normalcy in terms of what's going on out there.
Great. Finally, I think we probably have about another minute. A wedding, a honeymoon, this stuff, they hopefully are seamlessly taking off. All of a sudden, the lights go out, the storm comes, the family didn't arrive, the bride's parents are stuck in a bus somewhere. What's it like? What kind of funny stories can you share that typically go into this type of planning?
Weddings. But Albert, I haven't gotten married in a long time. I did it twice, but the first time didn't work out so well.
So it's 50-50, right?
It was amazing.
You're batting 500.
No, I mean, look, I've been out of the sandal space for 15 years. So there's 15 years worth of stories that I don't actually have to tell you, but
we're getting the cane. We're getting the cane from Chris.
Yeah, well,
and on that note,
because that last question was terrible, so I appreciate you rescuing me from.
Yeah, exactly. You're welcome for that. So actually, I'm super excited because I'm about to leave the country for the first time in over a year and a half or so. I'm going to Antigua on next Thursday, and I just got major FOMO checking out the Grand Antigua that you guys have, Sandals. Have you been there? What's it like?
Absolutely. No, I've got friends from Antigua, as well as a lot of history going to Antigua. It's a beautiful, listen, it's a fantastic destination. So as far as beaches go, it's famous for having 365 beaches, one for every day of the year.
I heard that. That's awesome.
But you need to, if you can get yourself out on a boat, you can try and get down to the Grenadines and Tobago Keys, because it truly is spectacular down there. So you're gonna have a great time. It's a beautiful part of the world. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people very happy to see you, because everyone wants to welcome back the tourists. So
I bet. Well, I don't know if Albert's told you, but I actually had the pleasure of going to high school with Adam Stewart. We played on the football team together, and we lived in the dormitories together. I'm so sad to hear